Hi everybody, this is Miss Tucker. I've come to you all today with a lesson on copyright and, just what is copyright and how can I follow the rules, right? Today's objectives is that we are going to define copyright as a verb and a noun. We're going to identify times when we may use copyright materials. We're going to evaluate the copyright law together. And then you'll be able to explain the rules and the definition of copyright in your own words and present facts with correct citations. You guys are going to know and be able to do so much by the end of this. I'm already proud. So what is copyright? Okay, copyright is a lot of things. It is a form of protection for original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression. Another long definition is that copyright is the legal rights to an original work. It defines the rules in which someone can copy in whole or in part original works in any medium. Basically, it protects creators by making plagiarism illegal. Super cool, but what does that mean when something's protected by copyright law? Well, this means that any form of intellectual property that leads to the authorship of literature, drama, music, basically any kind of artistic work, it's protected under the law from the moment that it's created, and it's bound to its creator. In other words, if somebody tries to plagiarize or pass it off as their own, there are some pretty harsh consequences. Possible fines for copyright infringement, taking someone else's work as your own. Fines can range from $750 to $250,000 and at least 5 years prison time. I don't know about y'all, but none of that sounds fun. So what exactly are the rules? Well, number one, not giving credit to the author, editor, or publisher is illegal, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. This means even if you didn't mean to take credit, you're still held responsible for it. Let's not do that. Let's look at some of the rules and how not to be fined for copyright infringement. Number one is, if you made it, it's protected under the law, and anyone else who tries to use it will be fined. If it's not yours, you must ask permission from the creator. And if they say no, you may not use it. And if you do, you will be fined. Unless you fall under the one and only exemption to the rule. Fair use. The long and difficult definition is, unlike the copyright law from 1976, fair use is a legal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright-protected works in certain circumstances. What are these circumstances? I'm so glad you asked. There are 4 criteria that assist in determining fair use. Number 1 is purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is for non-profit educational purposes rather than of a commercial nature. Basically, if it's not for educational use, it's probably going to be okay for fair use. So is it educational? Am I using it for school and assignment, or am I a teacher using it to teach my students? Who's the work designed for? If it's specific to education, they're probably going to want you to pay for it. But if it's general readership, such as National Geographic that I could pick up in a bookstore, that would be okay for fair use. How much of it is actually being used? If I'm making one copy of a single chapter or page out of a book, and it's going to my students for educational purposes, that's okay. If I'm copying an entire book, not cool. And could this use negatively impact sales of the work? If it means less revenue for the people that created it, that's not very cool either. You'd like to get paid for what you made, right? Now, if you noticed, there was one of these, I sounded more like I was reading out of a textbook. That's because I was. I want you guys to press save on that for later. It's important. But the answers to these questions could determine if we get to use the material or not. So, is it fair use? Quoting a small portion of an article from a magazine just for an essay at school? Probably. Copying the entire first chapter of a book to give to a friend so she won't have to buy it? Definitely not. Feels a little obvious, huh? That's because you already know if it's not yours, you do not have permission to use it. However, if it can be used under the fair use doctrine, there are still 2 rules we need to follow. The first is citing sources. Don't forget to cite your sources, you hear all of your teachers collectively scream. But why is it important? Because citing sources makes you not a criminal. Citing sources is what makes using parts of works under the Fair Use Act not plagiarism. Basically, if I'm quoting a poem and I don't say who wrote it, I'm giving the assumption that I did, and that's committing a crime. So you must give credit to its creator every time. Now, the last, examples. This is a poem that my mother wrote to me about July. Now, I know I just told you who wrote it, but I must still cite this in order to use it according to fair use. Now, there's 2 really popular ways to cite things, and the first one is APA format. All right, this one you'll use a lot in college. A lot of college professors require APA format, and it looks like last name, comma, first letter of the first name, the date it was written, and the title and format. MLA, which is what you'll probably use more of here in high school, is very, very similar. Last name, comma, first name, title in quotation marks, date, and then format. Now, there are differences, but mostly are similarities. Tucker being her last name, they include part of the first name. The title, the date, and the format are all included. They're just in slightly different orders each time. There are so many different sites that will help you cite things correctly. So sites with an S is websites. Cite with a C is giving credit, where credit is due. Okay, the first website I want to show you guys is called the Citation Machine. I absolutely love using Citation Machine when I am citing sources because it looks like this picture on the right here. This is actually the Citation Machine website where you can put in the title, the contributors, publication information, and it will build your source for you. If you're citing a website, a book, journal article, you can actually put links and ISBN numbers into this search bar up here, and it will find some of this information for you, and it will tell you if there's any pieces missing and how to fill it in. Another really great source is EasyBib.com. My high school librarian actually taught me about EasyBib, so it's also very, very, like it says in the name, it's an easy-to-use site. And there's many, many more out there as well. There's even some sites like Grammarly, which is a grammar tool. They have now included a citation section of their site as well. So loads and loads of different ways to cite things, and that's because it's so important. Okay? Now, that last rule you need to know, okay? It's that copyright doesn't just protect the content of the work. It also protects the format. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you're under the fair use doctrine or not. You may not change the format of the work you're using. If it's paper, you may not make it digital, even if you have the ability to do so. So earlier, when we were talking about the fair use doctrine, I started reading a sentence out of my textbook. So that took it from a paper format to a digital one. So technically, that's breaking the rules for fair use. Okay? So do as I say, not as I do. Right? The only exception to the format rule is if I have students who are deaf or blind and I need to change the format to make it accessible to them. But otherwise, if it's paper, it stays paper. If it's digital, it stays digital. And if it's not audio, it doesn't become audio. So, let's make sure we know all of the rules. If you create something, it's yours and automatically protected by the copyright law. If you use something that someone else made, you have to ask first. Unless it's a small portion of a general readership, something you could buy at the grocery store, for educational purposes that will have little or no effect on potential sales. You must always, always, always give credit where it's due. Cite your sources. Use EasyBib. Use Citation Machine. And lastly, you are not allowed to change the format of the work that you're using. It's not just the information in it that's protected, but the way it was created too. All right. In your Google Classroom, you will find these 5 questions that I want each of you to answer. I want you to define copyright in your own words. Tell me, what is it called when you break the copyright law, and what is the potential punishment? Tell me the 4 criteria for fair use. What are 4 rules of copyright that we defined? And lastly, I want you to find a quote online and correctly cite it using either APA or MLA format. List the quote, the citation, and what site you used to create that citation. All right, guys. I hope you know a little bit more about copyright now that we've had this discussion, and I can't wait to see which quotes you found online and which websites you used to cite them correctly. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a great day. Here are my references, just in case you need a little bit more information about what we talked about. The U.S. Copyright Office, their website link is right here. If you go there, you will find a lot of different resources, but right here I went to Copyright in General under their Frequently Asked Questions section. I also used my textbook. In Chapter 1, they have a subject header, Copyright Concerns, copyright law. I use the textbook a lot for this information. Here again is that citation for my mother's poem. And these last two, these are the citations for the pictures that I used here in this presentation. Because you always have to give credit where credit is due. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.